Since the dawn of time, men have looked up into the sky and been inspired. They have looked up and thought about the vastness of the world, and it has made them want to explore it. They have looked up and thought about how small they are, and it has made them consider themselves. When we gained telescopes, we were able to look further and see more, and we became aware of just how grand and unknowable our universe was. And that inspired people further. Some became even more amazed and found even more wonderment, and some became even more terrified. The increase in understanding was an increase in potential horrors therein. It is because of that amazing and unknowable nature that everything the heavens contain has been an ever-present inspiration and the subject of great works of poetry. Poetry like this. I find it hard to think of an author more prolific in portraying the feeling of terror that can be associated with the vast unknown than H.P. Lovecraft. Truly a master of his craft, Lovecraft's understanding of our capacity to be deeply afraid of the unknown vastness above us was without equal. His poem, Astrophobos, features his impressions of the stars following a progression from perhaps delusional wonderment to horrific realization. In the first two lines, Lovecraft shows the vastness of the stars using wonderful imagery and sets up a pattern of having every second line indented. This, coupled with an alternating rhyming scheme, gives the poem an alternating cadence, with every second line delivering a punch, followed by an elaboration. Lovecraft spends the next three stanzas describing his imaginations of the stars, with the first saying, "Fantasies of bliss descended in mirrored Elysian haze." In stanzas 3 and 4 he describes the stars as being a heavenly place, where the free and blessed dwell, and peace and innocence entwine by virtue's throne. This is quite uncharacteristic of Lovecraft, who usually portrays space as being filled with unimaginable horrors, instead of this rather heavenly imagery. He begins stanzas 3 and 4 in variations of the same line. There I thought, and there I told myself, with the second time feeling more doubtful and almost seeded with denial. The truth becomes apparent in the fifth stanza, when a red, delirious haze comes over the scene. He describes this transformation as beauty to distortion strange. The next stanza furthers this change, saying, all woe that seemed but gladness, and then, ere my gaze with truth was seared. This reaffirms that those previous visions were a fabrication, and the truth is, in fact, horrible and terrifying. The seventh and last stanza sums up Lovecraft's changed viewpoint. Now, Lovecraft is famously very xenophobic. Much of his writing suggests a deep-seated fear of all his surroundings. His opinions on war, his quite racist views, all point towards an extreme fear of everything around him. Interestingly, this poem could also be interpreted as a change from seeing space as a heavenly place to a more scientific viewpoint. Other than the one line where Lovecraft describes his adjusted views of the stars containing cacodemons mirrored with madness, nothing truly confirms anything more horrifying than great flaming orbs floating in space, godless and indifferent. And that change in itself could be horrifying. Stepping a number of years back, we can look at one of Lovecraft's greatest influences, Edgar Allan Poe, a man famous for his sci-fi writings, who was again fascinated by the heavens above. He expresses this in an abstract way in his poem, Alone. At first glance, it is a poem about Poe's childhood, growing up as a rather misunderstood person. And that it is for the first part. However, in the 9th line, Poe says, "Then, in my childhood, in the dawn of a most stormy life, was drawn, from every depth of good and ill, the mystery which binds me still." Here Poe describes the fascination which drives him. For 7 more lines he continues to describe the things the mystery was drawn from. Mountains, oceans, the sun, lightning, thunder, storms. It is here where his fascination with the sky comes through. In the last 3 lines, Poe explains how, again, referencing the sky, he saw the world differently. The cloud that took the form, when the rest of the heaven was blue, of a demon in my view. Here we can clearly envisage Poe looking up at the sky, seeing the horrors and creatures that filled his writings. Poe has shared with us both his personal experience of life as someone who sees things differently, and how that drives and affects his creations. all by looking into the unknowns of the skies above and seeing something more. The third and final poet whose work we will look into is John Keats. John Keats, like these other poets, is famous for his imaginings of the cosmos. His epic poem Hyperion is set entirely in the heavens, and the poem we will be looking at today, Bright Star, tackles his own impermanence relative to that of the stars above. Keats' first line announces the theme of the entire poem, with "Bright star, would I were as steadfast as thou art." He wishes he was as everlasting as the bright star, most likely the North Star, one of the brightest in the sky, and also one of the only ones that does not appear to move over time. In the next line, however, Keats begins to retract his statement, saying, "Not in lone splendour, hung aloft the night." He then continues for a further 6 lines describing the aspects of being a star he dislikes. Firstly, and most predominantly, the loneliness. Keats creates a sense of wonderment during this section, with the imagery of looking down on the earth, with its flowing oceans and snow-capped mountains. Keats then brings the poem back to his original statement. He restates his disinterest in the other aspects of a star, his only interest residing in its steadfast, unchangeable nature. Then, in the final section, Keats pulls us away from our heavenly perspective into his deeply personal, deeply human reasons for wanting star-like permanence. He desires steadfast, unchangeable life so that he can forever feel the soft fall and swell of his love's breast, to be with her forever, because, as he explains in his final line, to do otherwise would cause him to swoon to death. In this piece, Keats brings the abstract concept of existing forever like the stars down to personal human motivations. Keats himself died at a very young age of 25. Many suspect that Keats was aware of his impending death at the time of writing Bright Star, lending this poem a particular quality of melancholy resignation. The heavens above us serve as an inspiration for art of all kinds: music, paints, fiction, and poetry. Few other things are more terrifying or wonderful than knowing your insignificance in the infinite void. Yet to some, it serves to bring their minds close to those things most personal and insignificant, a juxtaposition to highlight both extremes. Considering this, it is no wonder we have such meaningful poetry drawing its inspiration from the great firmament above us.